The views and opinions expressed by the guests and hosts of this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the Lansdowne Public Library or its affiliates.
Welcome to the Lansdowne Public Library's Geek Out podcast,
where we geek out about just about anything.
I'm Dave.
I'm Jeff.
And today we are joined by a very special guest.
I'm Bob Becker. I moved into Lansdowne recently, so here I am.
Welcome to the town. I hope you're enjoying it so far. And Bob is a poet. Tell us a little bit about what drew you to poetry.
Well, I was in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, in the 4th grade. This is Martinelli, remember her?
I can't say that I do.
It was like 1963.
My old man might.
Yeah, there you go.
He's from around that
bring him in
woods.
No, I'm just kidding. All right, so I was in 4th grade, and she told us to write a poem. I wrote one. The next day, I saw her writing something on the board. It was my poem. That was kind of cool, so that was just the first time I did anything.
Wow. So you've been writing ever since that time?
Well, I mean, it wasn't, when I was a kid, it wasn't like a thing I thought too much about. I guess, when I got into college, they had like a course and stuff, so then I tried to do that, I was terrible. I was really bad.
Well, that's why you take the classes, to get refined.
To find out how bad you are.
Well,
I got better.
It's that expression, being bad at something is the first step to being kind of good at something.
And then it goes...
Yeah, you just got to keep...
Are you kind of good?
I'm kind of good at a couple of things. Right, poetry is not one of my learned skills.
Yeah, a lot of showers have died from people singing in the shower, right there.
So, you've written a lot, I assume?
Yeah.
And when did you really start to realize, poetry was something you wanted to continue doing?
I was with a music group, and I was in a theater group, and they would get, these songs or whatever. They need a moment or whatever they needed, and they need someone to do something, so I did the something. And it turned out to be pretty good. I started doing things that people liked, and so, yeah.
So you were in a musical group.
Well, it was a theater group, but also people were also in a musical group. And we started doing things together just to, in college you have basements. So we'd be in the basement, do basement stuff, and we'd put together maybe a song, and some things started to work out pretty good. So that's, I think, how I did that kind of thing.
Did you write lyrics or lines?
Lyrics.
And then that's...
Yeah, that was it. They needed someone to do that, and, it turned out, I thought it started to do pretty well with that.
That's amazing. That's a really cool leap.
Yeah. Well, life is full of surprises. Well, mostly bad ones.
Surely discovering you had sort of a knack for poetry was not a bad surprise.
No, it was fun,
And you picked it up as would you say it would be a hobby, or?
Well, I mean, something to try to prove things to yourself. And so I was in that class. I bet I can do better than this, because it was horrible. So it was a challenge. So I took the challenge.
Challenges are great motivators. Yeah, I took a few poetry classes when I was in school, too. And
that was you.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, that was me. Sorry about that. I just kept making faces and noises.
You still writing Will Not Talking class?
Yeah, I was...
I'm down to 300,000 right now. So I'm still working at it.
Yep.
It is kind of an interesting one, because I in a lot of ways, as somebody that works at a library, I feel the stuff that we are often used in school... the poetry they used to teach us, the books, all that, usually tends to be the stuff that I'm like, okay, I understand that this is all technically proficient, but this is very boring. It's one of those things that I think school for a long time turned me off of poetry.
Well, if you read the old poets, they're insufferable. They go on and on and on. Oh my God. The longest things. That is unbelievable.
What do you mean the old poet? Are you talking about Greek or...
Well, no, you take someone like Chaucer. You can't plow through that thing, and it's how do people read it? Some of the things are okay, but when they go on, you figure they didn't have Netflix, didn't have the entertainment. No, I'm serious. That's what they did. They had they spent all day reading these poems, and maybe it's a challenge to see if they could outlive it or something. They're really very, very long. It's unbelievable. So that's a problem for me. I don't really like reading that much, because my attention span... It's not that good. It never was that good. I don't think many people... you talk to people today, they won't read that kind of thing. Very few would, because it's just so long and boring,
So you're more interested in, contemporary poetry?
Yeah, well, Shakespeare, of course, is the gold standard,
Yeah.
He's in the best, so you're going to learn from him, of course. And so I always read Shakespeare, because it's just... You never get tired of it. I don't, because... Well, how many times do we quote? You say, there's the rub, and all these expressions, tomorrow and tomorrow creeps his petty pace. All those kinds of, great expressions came from him, so he's kind of his own category. But, then the other people, I guess the main thing is not to get stuff that's really, really boring. It's just hard for me. I don't have the time. I can't focus on it. I have to focus. I mean, if I don't focus, then it's just a fight. And I think poetry or any art should be enjoyable, not something you have to fight through. I think for people in our time, we'd have to fight through these long, long poems. It's just very hard.
I think I can agree with that.
Besides, we're talking about we enjoy the familiar, right? I mean, you can go to the unfamiliar. You have to start with familiar. And this stuff way, way back, it's just so unfamiliar to us. Just no appetite for it, really. I mean, you have to write paper on it or something like that and maybe force yourself.
Yeah, that's the part that always kind of, a lot of art doesn't really survive the dissection of it. As much as I generally do like Shakespeare's plays and sonnets, for 3 years in a row in high school, we had to read Romeo and Juliet, and I could do with never thinking about Romeo and Juliet.
Why did it take you 3 years to read Romeo and Juliet?
That's what I don't get, because I would assume these teachers were talking to each other, and they could just say, oh, we covered that last year. Maybe do, I don't know, Taming of the Shrew or A Midsummer Night's Dreams. But no, 3 separate teachers for 3 separate grades decided they probably know this one.
Well, there were 9 nations speaking through an interpreter, then they have the same.
Yeah. That's kind of how
there's a lots of translation
sometimes.
there.
My last year of college, I took a course that was Shakespeare in the movies, which was really interesting because, we read the play and then we'd watch an adaptation or, 2. And we watched 2 different versions of Romeo and Juliet. The one from, I guess it was the 70s.
Zeffirelli?
Yeah, exactly.
I saw that. All the girls liked Romeo. They did.
That's the exact thing. My dad said he was a kid when he went to go see it, and he said all the girls were crying in the audience, and he and his buddy were just making fun of it. But I gotta say, that was Romeo and Juliet was like, all right, I get it. Because then the other one was the one with Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yes.
And it's like, all right, I get it. I'm kind of done with this. But the really interesting one was an old sci-fi movie, The Forbidden Planet, which is, oddly enough, this was like, my dad would have loved this course because he loves that movie. But it's literally The Tempest.
Yeah.
And I was like...
that's what they took The Tempest and made it into a movie? I mean, that version?
Yeah, and it's a sci-fi film.
Leonard Bernstein did West Side Story. That was supposedly based on Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing that was really funny about West Side Story, off the subject. I'll tell you about Cherry Hill, right? In 1961, that movie came out and is like incredible, like the most artistic movie ever. I mean, you had these geniuses. Stephen Sondheim, Leonard Bernstein, who the choreographer was, I forget. They're all geniuses. I mean, the choreography is like there's ballet, there's tap, there's gymnastics, there's street fighting, there's everything. These guys are like incredible. And the really funny thing, in 1961, you couldn't curse in a movie. So what they did, these street gangs trying to kill each other with guns and knives, but so polite to each other. I mean, it's the funniest thing. It really is a right to see that. But like just the idea about art, what you're limited to do. And so that's part of it too, I think, what you're limited to do.
Sort of, that's kind of a way that, we can take poetry from a time when maybe it is indigestible to something that's more palatable or, understandable. Like, I think watching movies, sometimes it clicks where I get where this is supposed to be. Like Midsummer Night's Dream, the original 1930s? The original one, the black and white one, is really comedic. But there was one from, I think it was the 90s.
Another was an early 2000s version.
That's not the one where it's like sort of Victorian setting.
I think that's the one.
Because I hate that movie.
Yeah,
really.
Not great.
That sucked the life out of that play. Like, all the wordplay and stuff is there, but it doesn't feel right.
There was a version done in New York in 1970. They made it like an acid trip. Everything was on a white set and made it like Strawberry Fields. I mean, it was really crazy. But you can do that with that play. It's a full fantasy. So they took it, really blew it up. That was kind of cool.
You said there was it
was on Broadway.
Broadway.
The set, you could see the set was all white. It was pretty, and strobe lights and the whole thing. Yeah, it was pretty something.
It sounds
that does actually sound really.
Oh yeah,
really.
I guess they didn't record that. That was
maybe. Maybe you could look it up. I guess.
Yeah, there might be.
I'll have to do some digging because that sounds.
That sounds.
It was wild.
That sounds amazing.
It was. It really was.
Again, that I think helps poetry, and especially in the case of Shakespeare, a lot is performance.
Well, that's good. That's a good question because with Shakespeare, I mean, there's so much there. If you just perform, you're not going to get most of it.
No.
You have to read. I mean, you have to read it and study it. If you're just there watching it, it is
so many.
Right. You'll miss all that. But I guess the thing is, it was meant to be hit. It was meant to be acted, right? So there's that rhythm, there's that energy where you have the audience. with reading, it's more academic and getting ahead thing, but the feeling thing of the experience is the acting. And that's what you get, the actors and all that.
And I think a lot can be said for a lot of written poetry, where just reading it you don't always get that feel. Like you said, it's very academic. You can read it an entirely different way. And
it's like Shakespeare, he's such a genius. He had so many layers. I mean, people still reading stuff like 20 layers to the guy, It's amazing, really. That's why I read them,
Yeah. Keeping that kind of stuff under like a microscope. You can see all like the working pieces, but until you zoom out and sort of take it all in, it's
all the layers.
Yeah.
It's all the layers. You have the mind to look at the mind. It's like, your mind is all these layers, but you may not be aware. Like, there's a subconscious level of things. So if we were talking about writing poetry, I think it's kind of funny. I think it's true. When I'm writing a poem, let's say you ask me to write one. How old are you, by the way?
26.
26. I'm 69. My 69-year-old is not writing to your 26-year-old. My 7-year-old is writing to your 7-year-old. Because that's the energy. That's where the creativity started, where the filter was. My non-filter is writing to your non-filter, right? Because that's where that energy and that creativity was. And I think it's really true that we just talk to really creative people that are like little kids, And I think that's really true. I think that my little kid's writing to your little kid. And that it's kind of a fun thing, too, because then the age gap isn't really there.
Yeah, I guess I never really thought about it that way, but you're absolutely right.
Well, can I read a poem?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as he is a poet, he has brought us some stuff to read. So,
yeah, a couple things.
Yeah, go for it.
So, okay. All right, this one's called Again and Again. In my life of lessons learned, of place I've gone but will never return, of interviews that I slept through, of roommates and what roommates do, you could say it's just fate, or to learning to bend and not break. I've learned to bend, I expect to bend, but I had to bend again and again. They say in every life there are rainy days. A little rain's okay, but not a tidal wave. I've had to say goodbye to the best of times. I've had to add bad ideas to the bad idea pile of mine. I can handle hurt, having nothing for dessert, maybe nothing now and then, but not again and again. I'm used to going round and round and trying to break free. Once in a while I'll choose to sing the blues, but the blues keep choosing me. My friends and their different drums, I love you more than anyone. If not for you, I don't know what I'd do. I'd have no one to tell my troubles to. Maybe pretend I'm someone else. Keep my final scores to myself. I can handle trials, reasons not to smile. Being knocked out, also girlfriends who have their doubts. Being a best of friends to the worst of friends. Being wrong now and then, but not again and again. So that was that one.
That was wonderful.
Was it?
I think is this too dated? Is the snapping too dated?
You're on the poetry might be a little.
You're on the standard bass. You're on the snare, and are you on the keyboard?
All right. What did you call that piece?
Again and again.
Again and again.
There you go.
All right. Let's talk about it. I guess what is the format? I'm a little rusty on my
format? Well, there's different meters, there's different styles, and all that kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. So
I had a melody in my head.
I had a melody.
And I went with that. That's what I went.
And then you wrote.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay. So it's a bit freeform. Your format wasn't so much like an academic, standard. It was more. You had a flow in your...
Well, can I mention something about academic since we're on that?
Oh, sure.
Okay, when you write to communicate, right? You want to share an experience. You want to share a story. A lot of times, it shouldn't be done, but a bad writer will write to impress, right? The worst way to impress someone is try to impress someone, right? And I can't say I have it a lot, but you're talking about academic. I did read someone academic writing a book about art. And it was horrible because they're trying to impress you. They're using these crazy words you never use ever. And one thing that a bad writer is they use eyes, I-Z-E, on words. Vision eyes. I mean, just words with eyes. Don't do that. And people, I don't know why they do that. But bad writing is just, it's not communicating. You're just trying to impress people. And it's so obvious. You ever meet someone who's trying to impress you and you know it?
Yeah.
You remember that? Anyone see the Mary Tyler Moore Show? Remember the old Mary Tyler Moore Show? You've probably heard of it.
I've seen some of it, but not.
I feel like I definitely want to go on Nick at Night.
Okay. Well, you guys, your generation, you have YouTube. You can always go back and look at stuff. So I think you're more aware of what we saw because you have that available. So there's one character called Ted Baxter. So Mary Tyler Moore's running this news show, I guess. And he's the anchor. And he thinks he's this great model, whatever, this anchor. And he's terrible. I mean, he's a buffoon. He thinks he's great, but no one else does. So the pretentious person is Ted Baxter, right? If you're a writer, you don't want to be Ted Baxter. You don't want people to think this of yourself because people won't like you. You have allergic reactions to you, and it's not good, right? So when you're writing, write to express. Don't try to impress people. People see through it right away. Not that everyone does that too much. The main sin that people commit as writers is trying to write too much. You're trying to say too much, right? I think we all do that. We have all this stuff we want to say, but then you get lost. You're like this cloud. And why isn't this working? Well, because you're trying to make a cake, but then you also make the appetizer of the cake and fold the napkins, and it's too much, right? You just focus on one idea, because otherwise you lose people. Or you kind of know that, why is this confusing? Well, you're trying to do too much. I think that's the main thing that people all do. They try to do too much, and I've done it. So just have to make sure you don't do that.
Really, you're saying also write for yourself. Don't write for, other people.
No, let's say there's someone you care about and you love, you want to write them a love letter. That's a gift for the other person, or a gift kind of thing.
But you wouldn't want to, you're not trying to impress them.
Well, poets are broke, so they have to write. Yeah. You're broke, you better come with something. I think the development, I guess we're answering the questions that while we're doing this. It's kind of like when you get to find out if you're a poet to start with, because not everyone is. Anyone familiar with Aristotle? I guess some people. Okay. So Aristotle wrote something called the Poetics, and I think what he says is that either you can do it or you can't. Like if you're a singer or you're not, you're a poet or you're not kind of thing. And I think if someone's not a singer, it becomes pretty obvious. Like if you've seen America's Got Talent, they have really good people. And then they've got America's Got No Talent, right? Yeah. And they get up there and you just know it. It's all a cringe thing. It's kind of funny, but it's cringe. And then Simon's there, what was that? He'll let you know. But the thing is, you don't want to do something you can't do. If you're not good at poetry, I'm not saying you shouldn't try it or anything or learn. It's just, you don't want to set yourself up for failure because it's not a good feeling. And, you've seen the people on America's Got Talent. They think they're all great. Their family said they're wonderful, and, they're not. So you don't want to push something. It takes a while, like 3-4 years. But if you're not getting it, don't try to make it happen. You'll just get frustrated. Mostly if you really like poetry, you have that kind of thing. Usually you have something going with it. And I guess whatever you want to do. If you're just having fun or you really want to make money, not that you do. No, I'm just saying some people do. But the thing is, it's something that you're going to find out. You have to find out if you're good at it. Then once you do that, then you can go to whatever level you can go to and learn. But it's like singing. If you don't have it, I guess you can get better, but you're never going to be as good as someone who's good,
What would you say then to someone, or sort of like the notion that art is subjective?
You're talking about maybe like a bandwidth within what you'd like. Within a certain range, let's call it range. Within a range, there'll be people liking this and that, But then you got the people are going to die here and die there. So, you can tell people like you. You can tell, unless you have friends that like you all the time. No, you can tell people. If you're in front of an audience, you can tell just from the distraction, the way they're looking at you, You can tell if you got them or not. You can tell.
Have you done a lot of live readings?
Well, mostly I do songs because there's a vocabulary for that. There's a desire for that. There's not so much a desire for poetry because, like I said, it's a little more academic and there's not as much happening. Like with the beat and the music, you got some excitement with reading. I guess some people want to hear it, but unless it's spoken word and all the other going on with it, I have kind of a small group of people, really. That's what from what I can tell.
A lot of people have their groups for this sort of stuff, so, that makes a lot of sense.
Same way you're saying now?
A lot of people have groups, of just friends or colleagues.
Oh, yeah.
Just, look at C.S. Lewis and Tolkien. They just had their little group of writers, and look what came out of that. But, that was their group. They didn't have, they weren't in front of an audience.
Yeah, but they're a pretty smart group. You're talking about Oxford, and so people are pretty good at that already.
Well, yeah, but...
Some of the best educated men of their time.
That's true. But that could be anything,
Right. Yeah, the group thing, it's kind of a fun thing. And nowadays we're all joining groups. There are apps for a group and apps for that.
That's true. It's even easier.
Yeah, it's very easy to find people who share an interest with you, which is kind of a nice thing in the modern world.
Yeah, because people want connection, Yeah. Everyone's behind a screen. I think we've seen that problem. People behind a screen, they're relating to artificial things and not real people. That's not me growing up. We didn't have that stuff, so we were all real relatable and we had the real thing. So it's kind of an unfamiliar thing for me to be meeting someone who I don't know and connecting with that. But we need connections. Obviously we need that. Otherwise you're really isolated.
It is kind of a fun thing to just be able to be, there are so many people who I would never have been able to meet in real life in some of my hobbies just because they live hundreds of miles away.
But they're still not in real life. Well, no, in a way, I guess they are, right?
Yeah, because it's especially nowadays, like when I was younger, AOL chat rooms, those people could be anyone. But, nowadays with streaming and all that, like I can talk to somebody in Japan and hear their actual voice, get a not quite live video because there's always going to be some, weird little delay there.
Yeah, you're right. It is really cool to do that. See, when I was growing up, not to get too off, my brother was on what's called a ham radio, a shortwave radio. That's how we got things around the world. That's how they did it in the old days.
Yep.
And you would get to Japan and all those places for free. No, you would, for free. Yeah. You wouldn't have to pay for, a service or something. That was the old days. That's what they did, yeah.
I think we actually have a ham radio manual somewhere on our shelf, because every time I walk by it, I'm like, oh my god, this thing is...
I think we actually still have a crystal radio manual, in fact.
Oh, wow.
We've got...
Which is awesome. Like, every time I look at it, I'm like, I should learn how to do this, and then I forget about it.
Well, you have to get a license,
Yeah.
You can't just do it. You have to get a license, I think, from the FCC or something.
It should be.
You have to learn Morse code.
They definitely taught us that at some point in the Scouts, but I remember probably none
of the Scouts.
Oh, I just learned SOS from old Looney Tunes.
Yeah.
That's all I remember.
Yeah. Anyway, can I do one more poem? Because I want to do the one more here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before I evaporate. This is a true story. It happened in New Jersey. A hitchhiker, a story about a hitchhiker. It's called None of My Business. In the morning, I drive from out of state. There's a seal on every fate on Route 38. She was a star child trying to escape an angry rain. She had a lot of explanations no one can explain. There was torment, hijackers in her mind. She wasn't doing well. At least, she got a ride. It was a mistake I make every day. I didn't have to say what I had to say, but I said it anyway. I said, maybe it's none of my business. I told her vacant eyes. I believe there's a compromise between yourself and a lot of lies. She didn't appreciate me getting into her business. I should have kept it to myself, but I can't help feeling the feelings that I can't help. There are places I should never have gone to, where roommates don't work out and you get used to being used. Such sad places near restaurants and malls. They weren't so bad, we thought, until happiness took off. Maybe it's none of my business. Why does life twist and spin? Why doesn't the world make any sense? Why are poor people experiments? Maybe it's none of my business. You can't fix people like their cars. You can't repair the wear, and hearts still come with spare parts. Maybe it's none of my business, throwing a drowning soul a rope. You can't teach the hopeless hope. You can't clean cruelty off with soap. You can go crazy when it's none of your business. You can totally lose your mind. You gotta walk away and hope your memory goes blind. So every morning, I drive from out of state. I try not to contemplate the lessons of Route 38. I can't help it. I've learned to hate myself. Because what's not happening to me, I'm okay with it happening to someone else. Maybe it's none of my business. Superman got a lousy deal. A city's a hard place to fight with selfishness, hard as kryptonite. Since we're talking about business, keep the poetry. But if you get off at Route 38, think of me.
Wow.
Little story. True story.
True story?
Yeah, true story. Well, I'll tell you what happened. I was in Jersey. Well, I say Route 38. Actually, it was Route 130. 38 rhyme. Yeah. But yeah, Route 30, 130, and because I have a client I take there. So she was like wandering around in the rain. She was hungry, and I could tell she was real thin. We could tell on drugs, real thin. You could tell. And smoking all the time, talking real quick. So that was drugs, but she was real hungry, so that was believable. So I took her to the ShopRite and bought her some food, and she gave this real crazy story that I didn't know if it was true. I mean, she was talking about her husband. She left her husband. She had a southern accent, sounded kind of like southern charming a little bit, but she didn't look good. She was kind of not healthy looking. She could have been pretty if she wasn't sick looking, but she looked a little strange. So she talked about her husband and was trying to find her. She had run away. She didn't have any money. She had lost her documents and all this stuff. She was homeless. So after she said that, I knew some people in Philadelphia could help out homeless people. So I made some calls, said, look, I think I can help you out with a shelter thing. Not that they're good, but, wandering around the street. So I made the calls, said, you don't want to go? I can help you out. She said, okay. So she said she had been a mechanic. So I was driving. I had a little thing with the car, not big, but something. And she heard and said, she told me what was wrong with the car. She really was a mechanic. Can you tell? Then I put on some music. I think it was Lionel Richie. She started singing. I mean, the girl could sing. She was like really good. I was amazed. So this girl was really talented, really smart, wandering around. And so that's why I wrote it. That's why I wrote it, because, it's a thing about you trying to fix. I was trying to fix her. Okay, so the story is, I live in Lansdowne, so I was stopping by there, get some stuff. I was going to take her to the shelter. She wanted to get a smoke. I got done my business, looked out, she was gone. So that's the story. And that's why, I wrote I'm thinking about trying to fix people,
Yeah.
I don't know if you had done that or tried, but...
Yeah, it's a mistake made once or twice, yeah.
When you work here at the library, that's not exactly what we're trained or supposed to do, but on occasion, you got to help some people out, and sometimes it's a little beyond what we can do.
Well, they're asking you to diagnose them?
I can't.
Sometimes, honestly,
I can't say for sure, but I mean, people come in looking for all sorts of documents and things, and some people just need a little help.
You mean legal documents?
Oh yeah,
in some cases.
A lot of times, the library is the only place that you have access to the internet, access to a printer.
All right,
and you can get.
It's like a freedom of information thing. They're trying to get information from I mean, I don't know. I don't know anything about that.
We've had various people with just trying to find whatever it is they need. Some of them are a bit easier to help than others. Some of them don't really want the help. They just want somebody to yell at, unfortunately.
Well, there you are. You have a sign. Yell at me. No, I mean, look, libraries. Libraries are great because think of all the stuff you can get for free at a library. It's amazing, really.
One of the last places you can just come and exist without spending money.
I know, isn't that something?
Parks these days, they want money from you. It seems.
Yeah.
And here at the library, we do have a lot of poetry. So if someone was coming into, someone said, "I'm going to go to the library and look at poetry," who would you suggest?
Well, like I said, there's a range of what people like and don't. I wouldn't recommend someone who writes these really long things. It's just so hard to plow through. I mean, if they want to, I guess they can. But I'd say I have trouble with it. I mean, the good writers are just, well, like me. Like, for example, they had that, what was it, Les Miserables, right? Mm-hmm. And people said it was great. I didn't think it was great. For me, it wasn't great. The reason is I'm very sensitive to music. I like a good melody. But if you keep pouring music, constant music, I just can't focus on it. It's not I'm against it. I just can't focus on it. So for me, that experience was not good. Les Miserables, I didn't like it because I couldn't focus on it. I mean, I like Victor Hugo. He's a good writer. If you watch a movie like Hunchback of Notre Dame, it's fine. But when you have this constant music, I just can't focus on it. I'm not, it's bad, but I really like Guys and Dolls. You have some fun, you have a fun song, and you remember the song. What song do you remember from Les Miserables? I mean, maybe some, but come on, it's constant music,
Master of the House.
Okay,
probably
right.
The one that sticks to me. But
so you got that. But the thing is, you would remember more if you just had the good songs and the dialogue, because that's how they used to do it, right? Well, the American thing, the musical comedy is American. That's what was here. And I think that's familiar. That's what we're used to. So when you throw me in front of Miserables, I don't know what to do with it. Mm-hmm. If you like it, that's fine. I'm just saying, you talk about taste. I just can't process. I just can't take all that. It's like overdose. I just can't take all that music. I just can't focus on it. That's my experience.
Then who would you recommend?
Okay.
Like what?
So we're talking about modern people, right?
Anything you have a preference for.
My preference. The ones that I think about what I like the most: Rudyard Kipling, T.S. Eliot's my favorite. E. Cummings, if you know E. Cummings, he's a total crazy person. But no, he's a real challenge. He's a very, very interesting writer. He does very strange things, but it's kind of fun because you kind of have to crack the code on him. But when you do, it's really kind of a fun thing if you don't mind code, right? Not everything's code. Some things are a little more not code, but he's pretty coded. And then there's Sylvia Plath, I like a lot. Well, the main thing, I think they all have their own mastery of things that no one else really masters as quite as well. Like, of course, Shakespeare's the master what he does, but like Kipling's a master with the drama. He creates these, like Gunga did, this incredible story. And at the end of it, it's a really powerful thing. He says, "You're a better man than I am," because he's talking about this guy who's at the bottom of the barrel. He's untouchable, and he's giving water to everybody, and he's like a nothing to everybody. But he's this noble person. He tries to help people more than anyone. Then he says, "You're a better man than I am," It's a powerful thing. And then T.S. Eliot, he creates he does some amazing things with words. Like one thing I remember, my favorite poem, I know the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. It's incredible. You should read it. You should at least read it. It's one of the best poems. There's an expression. It's about a journey of a young man. I think he was only 20 when he wrote, like 1903. And it was like a powerful thing. I mean, really was exciting. So this is like an instant star in a way. You could be a star as a poet. So there's an expression I really like. A few of them. One is, I've measured out my life with coffee spoons. He says, I've seen the moment of my greatness flicker. I heard the eternal footman pull my coat and snicker. And great stuff like that. I really liked his stuff. So it's a great story. It's a great poem. And I recommend it. That's one of the best. And Sylvia Plath has these amazing expressions too. Like, it's really sad. And the main thing of her, she just is she's pretty self-occupied. She really, she's a little too self-absorbed. She doesn't really connect with people too much. Because, well, in a way, she's not quite relatable because I don't relate to trying to kill myself too much. But there's powerful things that come out of that. And you hear the cry for help, essentially. And so she'll say something like, I turn and burn. I don't underestimate your great concern. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of anger in her. That's, I think, what turned on herself. And she's married to Ted Hughes, who's a really good poet, but he found her dead, It was a horrible thing. But that's the thing. Being too self-absorbed, I think she didn't care enough about how other people were affected by her. And that's sad, If someone's wanting to kill himself, you want to help them. And I don't know if she really wanted to do it. I guess, maybe that was just, he couldn't have stopped it. I guess, I don't know. Maybe with drugs now he could, I don't know. But she's a great writer. She just writes these really powerful expressions.
Right.
Mostly, I think you go with things you don't forget. Like, for example, what movies do you like? You remember the moments that you don't forget, right? Like, Make My Day, right? You Can't Handle the Truth, right? Don't you someone you want to say that to, right?
Yeah.
That's what people remember, those moments. And thinking poetry is the same thing. Those are expressions you don't forget. And I think that's what makes good poetry. That's what I think, yeah.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that, yeah.
Yeah.
And as a writer, you want to do that. You want to make that happen, right?
Yeah, that moment that just sort of sticks to somebody.
Yeah.
I'm struggling. I'm trying to remember the name of this one poet. I might have to just sort of look up now because it'll kill me not knowing this.
See, when I was your age, we had to have a good memory.
Yeah.
There was no Google. It's like you had a reason. Yeah. Well, it helped anyway.
That's true. Oh, what was it? Was it Plato that said we shouldn't write things down because then people will forget things, and then people wrote books, and then that's just kind of that argument.
Well, I mean, Homer was a blind poet. I think maybe he memorized the whole thing. Did he?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well, I mean, poetry technically predates the written word. Like, most of our early history was poetry.
Well, if you look at any religion or any culture, it was the oral tradition. Yeah. Even Judaism goes back to oral tradition that wasn't written down.
One of the oldest pieces of writing we know is the Epic of Gilgamesh, which starts with multiple poems itself.
Right.
That's how old the poetry is, because if you have something, especially with a set form or a set meter or something like that, it's easier to remember. So,
Shakespeare wrote from oral tradition. Shakespeare wrote these old, like Romeo and Juliet. That was a story before. Yep. Well, all of them really. The history, King Lear. The only thing that wasn't was A Midsummer Night's Dream. I think he made that up.
Yeah.
But the other ones, they were stories that were there already.
And even then, like with A Midsummer Night's Dream, a lot of that is based on various mythologies of the area.
Yeah.
Oberon and Queen Titania were pre-existing figures that he worked into his story. It's the same with most children's stories started as oral tradition.
And some of them are really cruel stories, if you really look what they're saying. They're like about murder and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's not until the Brothers Grimm and a couple others...
They're called Grimm for a reason.
And their versions are toned down from the oral traditions. Did you find that poet you were looking for?
I did. His name was Wilfred Owen. Wilfred Edward Salter Owen. And the reason I remember him is because he wrote a lot of poems about being on the front in World War I.
Oh, really?
And they're haunting poems. But it gives a glimpse because he was a soldier and he was writing these. And I think the thing that sticks out to me, especially because of it, is the day he died was 7 days before the war officially ended.
Really?
He lived until a week before the war ended.
So his postmortem poetry, he was published like that, you mean, after he died?
I think a lot of it was published during, but it's just he didn't make it out. And that's kind of like, that almost adds a layer to it, just of like, this guy was there. He's not writing from far away. And I actually think he wrote a lot of it because he was injured several times. If I remember correctly, I think he wrote it while he was
injured. He got injured. That was like not a little thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that was like even worse.
That may have gone into view at any point.
They didn't have,
But then they would send you back.
I know.
So, and I think that was part of it, was he wrote about his experiences, and then, he went back and then he didn't come back.
So, give me, his name's Owen. Yeah, why don't you give me that name?
Wilfred Owen.
Yeah, I've been, one thing, one of the greatest war poems in my opinion, did you see the movie The Blind Side? It's about the football player. Sandra Bullock won the...
Okay, yeah.
What was it, 10 years ago? So it's about this football player. What he had to do, he came from, a background, didn't have a good education. And so he had to graduate the high school to get into the college, but his scores weren't very good. So the last chance was to write this poem. So what he did, he found a poem that he connected with. It's called The Charge of the Light Brigade. And so that poem was in the movie. It's one of the best war poems. It's a great war poem. It's my favorite. The thing that I really love about it is one thing. Why did the Light Brigade do a hopeless thing? They charged. They have no reason to charge. It didn't do anything. It wouldn't have done anything. They could have just run away. They could have been captured. They charged. Why'd they charge? It was the right thing to do. To them, it was the right thing to do. They signed up for that assignment. They followed through. It was their honor. It was an honor thing. It didn't win. It was just to their honor. They did it. It was, to them, at that time, that was the right thing to do. And that's why I really appreciate it, because I think that's a really good reason to do something, not because you're going to win. I really admired that. And I really admired that. I think that was the message he was getting. And it really happened. They're talking about war. That actually happened. There was a charge against the Russian army, the Boer War, I think.
The Crimean War.
Crimean, yeah. It really happened. And it says, and all the world wondered. What a great expression, all the world wondered. I mean, can you imagine? Yeah.
I've been watching a series actually about that war. They just did an episode about that, yeah. And the really interesting thing is that poem spread all over Europe. And it was this great romanticized thing.
Yeah.
But the really interesting thing is, while the poets made everyone go, wow, those brave soldiers, the war journalists made the British common people go, wow. All of the people in charge are there because their parents paid them to be commanders, and this was stupid. It's a really interesting dichotomy of...
Theirs is not the question why. Theirs are what to do or die. Into the Valley of Death, Road to 600. They knew it was going to happen. Yeah. There was no reason they did it. They did it anyway. Why? To honor the commander. They made that commitment, and they weren't going to back down. I mean, I think the honor thing is a really great thing. I believe in it. I mean... I'm doing the right thing is this thing I just believe in. It's a great thing. I mean, but it didn't do anything good.
No, of course not. And that's like part of the greatest thing about poetry is it can really, stir hearts and minds and everything.
Right.
Not that it's facetious or anything. That's not the point of this. But it's just the interesting thing is how, it's viewed from... At the time, on one spectrum, the medium has unmasked sort of a failing of aristocracy, sort of the British ideal.
I don't really have to mask it. It's kind of in your face. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. But if you're not on the front seeing this, you're kind of like, yeah, sure, I trust those guys.
Oh, well,
I trust the generals and things.
Learned.
And that's the thing. And a lot of people make jokes about it now. Is I got this position because my father simply paid for me to be here, and I have no qualities whatsoever.
I mean, that's. What was that? Pirates of Penance?
Modern
Major General.
Well, back then,
a little bit, yeah.
Back then, I'm not going to challenge it, of course.
Oh yeah,
because it's you talk smack about that guy, you can be executed.
Right.
And to quote that video I was watching, that charge of the Light Brigade, though it was highly unsuccessful, the Russians were still, from that point on, very terrified of British cavalry because they didn't know when they would just dive in. Even, we've got every gun against you if you get charged.
Can you imagine the command? Can you imagine command going charge for the guns? What kind of, would that be a scary one? No, but I think, like I said, I think we admire the fact they had that courage,
No, and the war poets from, especially that, like Leo Tolstoy, also, all of that, it gives an amazing perspective of this, of really a war that, especially I think, in, America, we didn't really focus on, and roughly I think at that same time, that's when the Civil War started to kick up.
War,
so we didn't, that was not our problem. We didn't care what they were doing.
Poets doing their own thing at the time.
But yeah, that's true.
And this is fun. I mean, this is great because I can see that art is something that takes you to a different place, a place maybe we haven't been before. You relate to people we haven't even seen, and it turns out that we have all this in common and all that. And also the generation thing. I'm 30 years older than you. And there's a connection. I think it's a great thing because I think we're used to being in our own group, right? Yeah. I'm used to being with people my age. You used to be with your age. So now I think art opens up to what you call the village, right? The village. I think that's true.
And I mean, I'm bringing up Wilfred Owen, World War I, wrote about the horrors. But also one of my favorite poets is Jack Prelutsky.
Oh, that?
I remember him from when I was like a toddler. We had a CD-ROM that had a bunch of his poems on it with, little animations, and they were kind of fun, but they were, it's like poetry for like 3-year-olds.
Oh, really?
But he was always...
I've read him. Yeah, I've seen his stuff. That's right.
He's fun. Yeah. I like him because I'm like, yeah, I remember really enjoying it. And even as a little kid, just being able to interpret that, I don't need not all poetry has to be deep, meaningful, it doesn't always have to be The Raven. Sometimes it can just be a silly little thing, and it's delightful. And I think that's what you're saying with, how you like Guys and Dolls as opposed to Les Mis.
Well, the thing is, I think the great thing is that it's like the theater thing is, don't let people know what you're going to do before you do it. Keep them guessing, That's the fun thing, isn't it? Yeah. Like Stephen King. Why is Stephen King so good? Because he goes this way, then that way, right? He's a master, right? He just throws you all over the place, right?
Most people know him for his horror, but then they'll see, Green Mile or Shawshank.
Shawshank. I mean, that went all three places, right? It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And great authors can do that, but I don't think it's limited to what you would qualify as a great author either. Yeah. I think anyone's capable of that.
Yeah.
Well, that's the whole thing. If people can't anticipate what you're going to do, then you can have that fun thing, the Og and Nash thing, the silly stuff. Another one, remember the song A Boy Named Sue?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was Johnny Cash. Yeah. Who was that writer? Silverstein, Shel Silverstein. He wrote this crazy, just like Presley, right? He's the same kind of guy. Yeah, it's pretty similar. And then he would do Boy Named Sue. He did the thing about the green alligators, and it kind of that was a funny about Noah and why are there any unicorns and that kind of thing. Yeah, it's all that funny stuff. It's kind of fun,
Especially, it is interesting because a lot of times, when I think of poetry in school, I think of the very boring, dry stuff that they would give us. But I learned to read with poetry. Most kids did because Dr. Seuss.
Right, Dr. Seuss.
He studied and he was like, well, if you use rhyming schemes to help the kids learn it, and it improves their recollection.
With words that don't exist.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, Shakespeare was big on that too.
Well, what he would do, I don't know if he did that so much. What he'd do, he'd use nouns as verbs.
Yeah.
Like he'd say, he turned the word gospel into a verb, gospeled. How do you gospel? So, he actually did. They did crazy stuff like that, gospel. I'm like, what are you doing, Bill?
Yeah.
Talking about acid trips. He was the original. He was like something. He took you on a trip. He really did.
If only he was around during the 60s. What could have been?
Yeah.
Greenwich Village would have been a field day.
That would have been an interesting...
Is that a Wes Anderson movie yet? I feel like it could be.
What's that?
Just Shakespeare, but he's somehow now in the 1960s New York art scene.
Well, I guess the closest was West Side Story. I mean, the theme.
Right,
the theme. I mean, it wasn't at all like Romeo and Juliet. It was. The thing, the idea is what Solomon said. There's nothing new under the sun. You're never going to write anything new. You'll never write anything new. So that's the thing of that, it's like you're always going to a story that's been just like that. You're going to tell the same story. You're not going to say anything new. You just have a different way of saying it, maybe your own style or something. Yeah. But there's no new stories.
Change some of the orders, change, Joseph Campbell, there we are.
What was that? What did he do?
The hero with 1,000 faces.
I don't know. Nothing.
So the idea with the Joseph Campbell idea of how stories are told is he basically lays out, this is how every story goes. These are the major plot points.
Well, that's true.
The refusal of the call, the meeting with a teacher, all those sorts of things. It's like, not every story is going to have all of these parts, and sometimes the order will be different, but they will follow this basic.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
There was somebody else who, I can't remember, but it was there's only 5 stories, and it's, boy meets girl, girl meets boy, something about the end of the world. I used to remember this off the top of my head, but now I'm older, and my brain is awful now.
That's another story. My brain is awful. The Beautiful Mind, right?
Are there any poems that are must-reads?
Okay, like I said, the love song of Jasper Prufrock is a must-read for me. The Charge of Light Brigade, we mentioned that. Gunga Din, this is Kipling. Sylvia Plath, Lady Lazarus. Let's see, what else? Oh, E. Cummings. Anyone lived in a pretty hot town. I just want to mention that because I figured it out. I'm proud of myself because I figured it out, right? Because it's a really crazy poem. So what Cummings does, he uses words in really weird ways. Like he uses the word didn't and did in a way you would never think. I'm sorry, you would never think. And for example, it starts out, anyone lived in a pretty hot town with up so floating many bells down. Another expression would be, he sang his didn't. He danced his did. And what is it? So he's using these weird things. So either you're going to go, this is crazy, and walk away, or like me and say, well, what's he trying to say? So I figured out what he's saying. It's a story about 2 characters, anyone and someone. And they fall in love. But the idea, How Town, the small town, is very, very oppressive and backwards. And they're born there, they live there, and they die there. They never get out. Everyone's like, they just never get out. It's a very backwards place. That's what Cummings is showing. And so it's a sad thing, but it's really interesting the way he describes it because it's very strange. He'd say he sang his didn't, he danced his did. Well, nothing happens. It doesn't happen. He didn't, right? He did what he could do. He could dance. He couldn't get anywhere, but he could dance. So that's why he's using these words. It's like a code, but once you understand it, it's really amazing what he does. Like, for example, when anyone died, I guess. So anyone died, and no one stooped to kiss his face. The romance never happened. It never happened. She loved it. It never happened. And then he dies. So then he says, leaf by tree and if by yes. He goes to yes, right? That's the spirit. So he has these really amazing things he does with words. That's why I like Cummings. Other things are a little more clear, like you talk about, I carry you in my heart, that's poem. Yeah, because a lot of weddings, they read it.
Yeah.
But he does the same kind of thing, but that's a little more clear. But a lot of the stuff is kind of coded, and it's just kind of fun to crack the code, Because after a while, you understand what he's doing. And I just like the fact that he uses words in this weird way,
Yeah, like you said, he danced his didn't. Is that the line?
He sang his didn't, he danced his did.
So that's kind of like what you were saying with Shakespeare, where he verbed a noun. Yeah. This was kind of nouning a verb.
Yeah, you're right. But it's even a weird verb. You want to do in to be, is, and was. That's hard. You're talking about be, like being was a little strange thing to play with.
Yeah, but now I really want to read it because that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, okay. There actually was a movie made, Anyone Lived in a Pretty Hot Town. Basically, it's about a small town and all the bad things you could say about it. No, really, that's what Cummings was saying. That he says this is a very oppressive thing. People don't get anywhere. They're very backwards and all that. But so it makes a good story.
And that's, I think, something to look out for in poetry, especially. Yeah. And that's why we'd like to hear different perspectives, especially someone who's you're involved with poetry. You have what you like, and I haven't dove in deep into any of that.
In a way, everything's poetry. If you're talking about a rhythm or a flow, everyone has their flow. Even if you're a mechanic, an airline mechanic, the things they can do that you can't do, how do they do it? They just have it in them to do it, right? There's something about their brain, they can just do stuff. I can't do it, but they just have that knack, that ability. Or if you make cakes or whatever you can do. There's something about, I think, a lot of people, maybe most people, I don't know how many, most people have that thing that they can do that other people can't, and they don't even know how they do it. It's just there, So I think that's poetry too. The cake can be a poetry. The car can be a poetry. It doesn't have to be a writing poetry. There's a kind of art to it because there's a kind of subconscious knack to it. There's kind of a flow. It's not really something you think about as much. Or let's say breaks down into as definable as a science. It's more of an art to the mechanic, an art to the cake, an art to whatever, Yeah. So I think that's a cool thing.
I definitely agree. That's a really amazing thing.
Yeah, and the poetry, too, is also we're connecting with each other. It used to be poetry was just for, people in a college or whatever. But then with rap and all that, or let's say spoken word, that's good stuff. Spoken word, you've seen a lot of spoken word, some spoken word. It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Admittedly, I haven't seen enough of it. Are there any spoken word pieces or artists that you would recommend?
I can't think of names. In churches I've seen people do it. I guess where they have plays, sometimes they'll have spoken word plays. Or a poet, like say, though, I guess some people are spoken word poets. I don't really know the names too well. Maybe it's getting more popular. I'm not sure, but
we used to have some people who worked here that would go to spoken word nights, and I don't remember where they would go for it, but it was definitely came up more than once. So it's definitely popular. I think it's kind of a niche, but
all art is kind of a niche if we get really down to it.
That's true, and maybe it's to people that are more aware of it. It's more of a thing, but I'm not. So
it's kind of cool. It's almost a full circle thing. If you figure that stories came from oral traditions, or Shakespeare came from oral traditions, kind of comes full circle. Even going back to the oral stuff, it's kind of cool. I like it.
Yeah. What advice would you give to somebody who's just looking to just start practicing, starting to find their voice in poetry?
Yeah, read people. Just read people who are good. Read Shakespeare, read Milton, read all the, Browning, Hughes. all everybody. Just read and see. If you look at what they're doing and how they're doing it, then you have an idea. What the elements of style. Here are the elements of style when you're writing. You have an idea of it. And then you just try. It's an experiment and see if it's there. See if you got that kind of thing that you can do. And like Arso said, either you do or you don't, right?
Yeah.
Either you do, either you're a singer or you're not. Either you got America's Got Talent, you got America's Got No Talent. Whatever it is.
Do or do not. There is no try. thank you so much for coming in and talking about poetry and reading some of your fine works. Have you published any of your work?
Well, I put something together on a site, but the thing is I don't have a final product, and I don't want to put it out there as a final product because I want to clean it up. But if I do, I guess I know I could let people in the library know about it, and we can do something.
Yeah, let us know.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if anyone wants to know, we'd love to give them some information.
There you go.
All right, but thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been the Lansdowne Library's Geek Out podcast. Jeff, if people want to come on here and talk about what they're passionate about, what do they need to do?
Well, the easiest way is you can just visit our website at lansdowne.library.org/podcasts, and there'll be a green Register Here button. You click that, there's a little form to fill out, and that'll let us know you're interested.